Hey everybody, welcome back to the OVRWATCH channel on YouTube. In this video I'm going to be covering the fall of man, original sin, and the ridiculousness of the whole concept of that. And I'm going to back that up with some logic, reason, rationality, and hopefully not really offend too many people. So if you're a Christian, information may disturb you, but I'm going to present it in a respectful manner. And I hope you stick around to listen to what I have to say. So anyway, let's get started. Before I get into the nitty-gritty of the logic or illogic of the concept of the fall and original sin, I need to back up a little bit and build up a little bit of a foundation for all this. So let me start off by saying, as I was researching this stuff in depth, as I was trying to find authentic Christianity, having grown up in Christian household, Roman Catholic, went to Roman Catholic school for 12 years. I did a lot of research on top of everything I learned in school, but I also did a lot of my own research in the last 2 or 3 years, in depth, reading the whole Bible cover to cover in more than one translation. And you've heard me say this in other videos, but I think it's important I build up some kind of a foundation here. So imagine my surprise, as I'm sorting through this material, I pick up all sorts of information. I kind of may flag as important or red flag it, and then I put it, on the side in my mind to come back to later, or maybe it'll make more sense later. So one of the books I read was Cold Case Christianity by J. Warner Wallace. He was a former cop. He's also a former atheist, and his book is a good read. I recommend it. But it's the first time I ever heard of the fact that the adulteress story in the book of John is a story that was added in later. It's clearly an addition. All scholars are pretty much in agreement with that. All the earlier translations do not have that, or I should say, all the earlier texts do not have this. This is clearly something that was added into the text later, and then later got put into the canon of the Bible as part of the official Bible. But it's this whole concept of this woman caught in adultery story was not in the original text. So it was added in by people who were copying these books. This is amazing because, you're told, as many Christians believe the Bible is inerrant cover to cover, and they need apologists to explain how somehow this story is true even though it wasn't originally in the Bible. So interesting that they had to go to that length. Also, things like the Great Commission, end of book of Mark, the whole ending of Mark is an addition to Mark. It was not in the original or earliest manuscripts. So these things started to weigh on me, and then you have this whole we have living witnesses, folks, living people that are alive, that have had near-death experiences that are credible, that include many of them include veridical perception, that are verified by doctors or verifiable out-of-body states before they move on and meet spiritual beings or sometimes even God. So these people are important because, let's face it, if you're going to make a judgment about something and you have 2,000-year-old texts versus living people that you can question that have had spiritual experiences, you definitely want to talk to the living person, don't you? So what you learn from NDEs is that they do not fit Christian doctrine or any religious doctrine for that matter. They defy reductive materialism. So it's really, I've been in a position now, a unique position where I'm a complete outsider to all of this stuff. I look at it and I can see all the little dialectics, all the little group versus group, belief versus belief. And it's interesting to me how things appear now. So you have two atheists here. I highly recommend that you search for these two online. You'll learn a lot from them, their experience. Howard Storm, who was an atheist and a generally mean person before his experience. He had a very hellish NDE, but then was pulled out and saved by a being he identified as Jesus. And that's where I want to really tell you that this is about the fall and original sin, that concept, and the concept of biblical inerrancy as a whole. I look at the totality of the evidence. I don't shy away from any of it. So, it's interesting to me that, you can find NDEs where there's a Jesus figure. You can find people that have had prayers answered when they're praying to Jesus. So healings have happened, miracles have happened. And I'm sorry, atheists, I'm sorry you find that uncomfortable or can't accept that, but that's the truth. But you also have Buddhists who meditate and pray and have had the same experience. You've had prayer experiments. Let me see if I can find the prayer experiments. I have a playlist where this guy, I have several videos from Craig Keener. He has written volumes of documented material, miracles. In interviews with him and Gary Habermas, who is a Christian apologist, and I have several of his videos on my channel, it's interesting to me how these Christian apologists it'll come out as they're talking. Red flags will, as I'm listening to these people, come out because they are revealing the deficiencies in Christian doctrine and dogmas, while at the same time trying to prop up their Christianity. So, like, for example, Habermas and Keener will both admit that, prayers get answered by to non-Christians. And then they'll come up with some kind of, excuse for that. Like, they'll say, well, God can answer anybody's prayers. But reality, is that what Christianity teaches you? Isn't it the one true religion? And really, how could God answer like a Buddhist prayers if Buddhism is a false religion? And many Christians will tell you it's anything outside of their particular version is satanic. So isn't that interesting? Near-death experiences as well. Gary Habermas has done research into NDEs, and he's willing to accept all veridical or verifiable out-of-body states, but he doesn't even want to look at the transcended experience after the tunnel, when you meet the dead relatives, when you meet angels or other spiritual beings, because the totality of that information does not fit the Christian doctrine or dogma. It's either what he does, which is ignore the differences, or worse, other Christians who study this stuff will say anything that doesn't fit Christian doctrine is a satanic lie. So you have that to look forward to. But what about biblical inerrancy? The Bible. What is the Bible exactly? The Bible is supposed to be, I would say, would you agree with me that it's the user manual from the manufacturer, from God to humanity? This is humanity's user manual for us, from our Creator. Isn't that what it really is? And people are told this book is inerrant, it has no errors. Now, like I said, you can find phenomena that are supernatural, spiritual, healing, etc., in the figure of Jesus. As a matter of fact, Jesus himself has quoted as saying so many profound things. Let me just bring up one thing real quick here. The golden rule, because like I said, I look at the totality of the information. The golden rule comes up in not only in the Bible. This is the do unto others as you would have them do unto you, but you actually find this concept of reciprocity throughout all cultures, all over the world, all different beliefs, except for atheism, of course. But these concept of reciprocity comes up everywhere. And what is it? Why this is so important? Why is the do unto others? Now, whether you're a Wiccan who believes that you can do what you want except harm none, and this concept gets reworded in all different, but it says that basically the same thing. I mean, Confucius sort of said it inverted. He said, "Don't do unto others as you would not have them do unto you," or something like that. He said it a little differently, but he did basically say the same thing 500 years before Jesus Christ did. So this concept, you see this come up over and over again in NDEs because of the life review. Now let me just bring up a short clip here. This is everything you see on the screen as usual. I'll link to, but you have Betty Eady, who is a Christian.
See for myself and feel for myself all of the pain that I had created while I was here on earth. It was not a very happy experience for me.
In other words, she had made her own decision. She had judged herself, and she was not going forward. That's why I asked you about whether you thought some did not go forward to the light.
Yes, I knew that this was also a choice of theirs, not of God's. I too experienced a life review. It was sometime later in my experience, but I had to experience and see for myself and feel for myself all of the pain that I had created while I was here on earth. It was not a very happy experience for me, but I was also allowed to experience all of the good that I had produced.
You see that over and over and over again in NDE experiencers. The life review where you get to experience the pain and anguish you cause other people. Just think of a world dictator that passed on or whatever, the life review they must have if they caused death to millions of people. This is the golden rule. This comes up over and over again. So yes, there is something to some quotes from Jesus in the Bible. I'm sorry, but this totality of the book, let me just put it to you this way, folks. This book is supposed to be the inerrant user manual from God to humanity, right? Now, if it's such an important book, think about it this way. We're talking about the creator of the universe, the source that has so fine-tuned the universe that any slight deviation would result in us not being here. Even atheists like Christopher Hitchens is on video on YouTube. You can find clips of this where he admits that was even a problem for him to deal with, and he was able to slush off all kinds of crap using nonsense and illogic, and even that caused him some dilemma. So the fine-tuning of the universe, the coding of DNA, just the sheer magic of when you're outside looking at the world, looking at the sky, looking at a sunset, thinking about the whole universe for a moment. You're expected to believe that the creator of that inspired word for word this book, even though it comes up in different translations. You got Christians on here on YouTube here saying, oh, you're missing the book of Enoch. All these different interpretations of this. Do you know how many 43,000 denominations of Christianity worldwide? Here's the thing. Well, okay, so here's a car user manual. Okay, you know what the difference between these books and the Bible is? These books don't need anyone to tell me what they mean. There's no apologists for car manuals. There's no confusion over what they're saying. If you own a 1967 Chevy truck and you have this book, you understand how to operate the vehicle safely and how the manufacturer and what the manufacturer intends for that vehicle, so that if you violate the parameters, you understand what you're violating. There's no groups that get together to try to interpret this book. This is kind of a silly analogy, but it makes sense when you think about it. You're expected to think this is inerrant, okay? And I'm not saying there isn't some truth in here, but to think that this book, that you have to derive the past, present, and future from this book alone, is illogical and irrational, and it's emotionally charged thing for me to say. I understand that, but it is what it is. So when you read a book like this, you can pretty much it's not subject to interpretation, is what I'm saying. It's written. It says what it means. What it says what it means. and it's there for you to understand how to properly use things. Now, many people will, or some atheists will point out the fact that we don't have the original manuscripts, and Christians will point out, well, they're closest to anything else we have. But that's not true. Was there a technology at the time of Christ and after that and before that, when they were writing these Hebrew and Greek manuscripts, that they could have been preserved if God wanted them to, if He inspired them to? Are there any examples of this? Yes, the Sumerians wrote on baked clay. They wrote on clay and baked the clay, and we have original texts from them. 4,000-year-old tablets, etc., that we can look at and read, and their language was never lost. It was a technical language in the area where the Sumerians were. The cuneiform and the understanding of that language survived. It was never lost, and we, as a result, were not only able to read preserved text from them, but we can learn a lot from what they have the right to, because there's a correlation between the flood in Genesis and the Epic of Gilgamesh. And if you never read the Epic of Gilgamesh, I recommend that you read it. It's really interesting. So the thing is that if God wanted to inspire people 2,000 years ago or whatever to write the New Testament and have it be absolutely preserved, the technology was available without having to do anything crazy. You didn't have to drop a laptop from the future to word processor to write this stuff down, to preserve it for modern age. They could have written it in clay and baked the clay, and we would have still had it today. So now let's take a look at original sin and the fall of man, the concept here. What is this really saying? See, apologists have to tell you what things mean in the Bible. And like I said, if you read what it says, you can start to get red flag after red flag. Keep it in mind, you have any number of translations to choose from. I prefer the English Standard Version for myself. I've read the King James Version, the cover to cover. I've looked at the King James onlyist argument. I've done all that. But what is this really saying? This is saying that two people were created by God, Adam and Eve. I'm just paraphrasing here, but I think every Christian will agree with this concept here. They were given immortality through the tree of life. They were given a rule. Actually, Adam was, or that we can infer that Eve knew about this rule, that they were not to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And then from there, it's easy to understand. These two people did not know good and evil. They only had like this sort of like existence where they were okay, let me put it this way. In the American criminal justice system, we have a concept of what that means if you don't know the difference between good and evil. And this is going to be disturbing. I don't mean to offend, but technically what the Bible is saying here is that God created two people that would be considered in modern day America to be criminally insane and not responsible for anything that they do. Okay, that's the first problem, is that you have two people that don't know the difference between good and evil. Now, apologists have tried to explain this, and just like atheists when they try to explain things that defy reductive materialism, you read this crap on atheist websites, you can read this crap on apologist websites trying to explain this. Adam and Eve doesn't know good and evil, then how can they be held responsible? So people ask these questions because they come up. And this answer here, I'll link to this, but it doesn't really jive. It doesn't make any sense. So I'm not going to read this out loud. I'm really terrible at reading text out loud. Otherwise, I'd be working for Audible, but I'm good at just talking off the top of my head. The basic thing is that the explanation here does not fit with what the Bible says. These two people existed in a vacuum, basically. They had no concept of good and evil. Given a rule, they break the rule. How could they know the consequences? That's the first problem. The second problem is this whole concept of God visiting the iniquities of the parents on the children, God being jealous, which is an emotion of insecurity. How could somebody that makes fine-tuned universe be jealous of anything, folks? How could somebody that can create all this be jealous? They can't be. There's no insecurity if you're the creator of everything. How can you be insecure about anything? The fall, this original sin, this now is allowed to take away our immortality, okay, from the tree of life is blocked off. And now we'll have to die, suffer, starve, war, rape, murder, all this crazy bullshit that we have to go through in this world. And this book is telling you that that's your fault, it's my fault, and that this has allowed to go on for thousands of years before we get to Jesus, who's the Savior. And this literally is telling you that God sends himself to earth to kill himself, to sacrifice himself to himself so that he can forgive us for our transgressions. I admit there's something to the Jesus thing from the near-death experiences. There's something to the fact that you can pray to Jesus and get prayers answered. But this concept is preposterous. It's ridiculous. It makes no sense. This is very troubling for me when I first realized this because like I said, I was indoctrinated into Christianity. There are things that keep you from getting to the truth. Ego, fear, indoctrination, bias. There's all kinds of psychological effects like the backfire effect, the confirmation bias. All this stuff gets in your way. Of course, bullshit artists, frauds, people that we allow to be authorities over us to tell us things, and all this stuff constantly gets in the way. You have to really want to fight all this stuff to get to the truth. Fear being the biggest one for Christians, or if you're questioning this stuff, if you're a Christian because you are afraid you're going to go to hell. Okay? But in fact, when you study near-death experiences, you find hell is a self-made thing. You go there because of your state of being. It is not like a fiery pit. It is you facing what you did. You reap what you sow. So I have to tell you something. If you're one of these Christians that go around criticizing everybody because, or telling gay people they're going to go to hell or something like that, this is something that you're going to have to face later. Now, so the fall of man, how am I responsible for what people did 6,000 years ago? 2,000 years after the Savior comes, why are we still here? How many failed predictions of the book of Revelation have there been? This goes on and on and on and on. Nobody ever stops to look and think, is there any other... Am I just wrong? I mean, here you have a pagan view of the afterlife, NDEs. They're all over the place. Here's an article from neardeath.com about religion and the NDE experience, breaking down all these different types of experiences. Here is an NDE of a Christian Episcopalian who has a very Buddhist-like NDE. Also, she gets to witness hell as sort of like an outsider or this hellish state. Everything seems to be like we can't understand things in the afterlife because, the way I see it, we are consciousness beings of consciousness that are jacked into our brains, and our brains are deliberately designed for some reason to reduce our ability to understand things. And this is something that it's kind of counterintuitive. But we're supposed to be here to voluntarily help people. You can't be coerced into being nice to people. You have to, it's maybe a learning experience. Perhaps it's downtime for the consciousness. Perhaps we have to come here. Who knows what the reason is? But the reason that we're given by Christianity, by fundamentalists in the Christian belief, do not make logical sense. How could two people cause this and everybody is punished for 6,000 years? Can you find anything on earth that is older than 6,000 years? Because if you can, that totally blows away the literal creation theory. And if you look, you will find things that are irrefutably older than 6,000 years old. So it's problem after problem. She was a Christian. She expected when she died to be asleep for her until the second coming. That's what she was told by her particular dogma of Christianity. Some Christians believe that. You have miracles being answered to non-Christians. These are just some channels that my YouTube page. This guy here, he's an agnostic. He had an NDE. This title is kind of misleading. He simply was meaning that the mind being free of the body is where you have your near-death state. So you have the golden rule, the truth that you come up with if you study the NDEs. But this whole concept of the fall of man and original sin. Here's two atheists. Why did they go to heaven? Both of them. Eben Alexander, he went straight there. No stopping, no hell. Why? Because he was a kinder, gentler person. He was a caring doctor who was compassionate. And if you read his book, you find out he was kind to people, even if they told him things in the hospital when he was an atheist doctor about some experience they had. He would not be insulting to them. Versus this guy, Howard Storm, who was an art professor, college professor, atheist, arrogant, narcissistic, self-centered. He's a hellish NDE. But then during his death state, he calls out, and because he calls out to Jesus, guess who shows up? Jesus, and pulls him out of his hellish state. Why does Christian dogma allow like Eben Alexander here to go straight to heaven? Or no, because according to the book of John, how could that be? There's so many problems that you can come up with as you look into this stuff. But I just wanted to start off with original sin as I go through the Bible here and point out some problems. But how could original sin, how could this concept be? How could I be punished for something other people did? I didn't have any choice. I didn't make any decisions. I didn't break any rules. And even the people that supposedly did, according to the Bible, how could they be held accountable if they can't tell the difference between good and evil? I guess I covered it all, folks. I know it was like a wide thing to get to this original sin, fall of man concept, but I had to give you kind of like an overview of everything so that you could see like a big picture to this. I hope I wasn't too all over the place, and that's it. Take care. I'll see you next time on the Overwatch channel on YouTube. Bye.